All right, now that we've had some practice reading for loops, we're going to practice writing them. So for this video, again, as always, I would have you trying this and then unpausing the video to kind of check your work. So make a new class file, call it for loop examples or whatever you want to call it. And then your first goal here is to try and write a for loop that displays the first 10 perfect squares, right? So you could, load up some other examples. You could even just, Google search a for loop, Java for loop if you need help. Otherwise, you can look back at your notes from some of the previous video on for loops. But anyway, see if you can write out the one that'll display the first 10 perfect squares, and then unpause the video to check your answer. All right, so the trick here is basically I'm going to loop from 1 to 10. So basically I'm going to do 4, and I'm going to make an int, call it whatever you want, I, or maybe I'll call it num, I guess. And I'm going to set that to be 1. Okay, and then I do a semicolon. That's the first part. That's the initialization part of a for loop. And then we want to run while num is less than or equal to 10. Right, you could also do less than 11 there, but basically we want to keep going while we're below 10. So that's our condition. Another semicolon, and then how do we want num to change? Do we want to go up by 1 or 2 or whatever? And so we just want to go up by 1. So I'm going to do a plus plus num. Right, no semicolon on this last statement, which is kind of weird. It's kind of like an implied one right here. Okay, and then we're just going to have an open and close curly brace. Right, so that is going to run through the numbers basically. Right, it's going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, dot, 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 dot. Okay, and so we could system out print num, but we want to do the squares. So all we have to do here is instead of num, do num times num, and it'll be the square value. Right, so if we run this, we can see we get the first 10 perfect squares. Right, and one of the things I think that's really cool and powerful about loops is you could say, well, Mr. Westphal, maybe I want to know the first 100 square numbers. Right, all we'd have to do is change one number, right, and hit go again. Okay, now we got a giant list that displays the first 100 square numbers, right, which is pretty cool because it runs real fast. We just got to change one number and it does its trick. So I'm going to put it back to 10. But yeah, there's our first example. All right, I'm going to load a second one for you to try. Okay, so next up is a loop that we want to loop through the letters in this string, or any string really. So it should work with any length string. And we want to count the number of A's that are in the string, like the number of letter A's. All right, so just to kind of help a little bit with this, like if you feel like you got it, go for it. Pause the video, see if you can actually write the loop that does that. If you need a little more tip, I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit here. And basically what we want to do is go letter by letter, right? So write a loop that goes letter by letter and checks if it's an A, add 1 to a count. So basically we're going to make like an int variable, a count variable, and we're going to start it off as 0, and then each time we hit an A, we're going to increase by 1. All right, and so what the loop does is really just needs to loop through these letters. And so the way it works is like W, that letter W is actually just a substring call of 0 to 1. Right? Remember that substring runs one pass, so to get the W we would do substring 0 to 1. To get this A we would do substring 1 to 2. To get the R it would be substring 2 to 3. Okay, so what we're going to kind of do this, generalize this, is we're going to basically call substring of I and then I plus 1. Okay, so we're going to make a little loop that has an indice called I, and then it loops through and gets one letter by letter. Okay, and so kind of the tricky part is at the end, I think we do want to go all the way up to 6, right? So we'd want to do a substring in this case of 6 and 7. That would be our last one. So we do substring 6, 7, and that would be right because it would run one pass and that would get the S. All right, so basically we want I to go from 0 up to 6, which the general version would be 0 to the length of the string minus 1. All right, like this one has a length of 7, So we want our loop to run from 0 to 1 less than the length, in this case 6. Okay, and so that's what we're going to make a loop for I that does that, and then calls it with these little substring call of I and I plus 1, which will get the letters one at a time. All right, and again, it'll look like this, kind of what we got, all the way up to, in this case, 6, 7, and then check if it's an 8, and if it is, increase the count. Okay, so now we got a plan. Again, I would try and pause it and see if you can do this. If not, you can, watch kind of the first few parts of it for a few steps, and then then pause it whenever you feel like you got it. So kind of you can go back and forth, watch the solution, do it all now, whatever you need, basically. Just try to do as much as you can first without watching the video, right? And then when you get stuck, you can watch for help. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to do an int as a count of how many A's, which is just 0. Okay, and then I'm going to do my for loop like we talked about. So I'm going to start my indice at 0, right? And that comes from my first letters at position 0. And I want to go while I'm less than or equal to word.length, right? Because I want to go 1 less than the length. All right, so sorry, length minus 1. Okay, and then we have a plus I. All right, so that's how we loop. We go I starts at 0, and then we go less than or equal to the length minus 1. Right? Another really common way to do this actually is just to do less than the length. So again, if I go back here, the length is 7, and if I go less than the length, that'll go up to 6. So you can kind of do it either way, less than the length or less than or equal to length minus 1. Plus I. Okay, so I'm going to get the letter. So I'm going to make a new variable called letter, and I'm just going to call word.substring like we talked about from I to I plus 1, and that'll get the letters one at a time. Okay, and now I want to do an if to say if the letter dot equals A, then I'm going to plus to my count. Okay, and then that's it. So after the loop is done, I'm going to print out, the number of A's is plus whatever my count is. Okay, so we can see here for War Pigs, if it works, I got a count of 1, right? And let's try a different one like parabola, bola, right? That should be a 3 if we did it right. Okay, so we can see that it's working out okay. Okay, so that's a pretty hard loop, but it's super common that you'll loop through the letters. And so basically, you do the indices and then do a substring from I to I plus 1 to get the letter and then go from there. All right, that is it. So we wrote a couple of loops in this video. They got 3 parts again: initialization, a check, a condition, and then how do we increase the variable each time. Okay, that is it. Thank you for watching.